There's a quiet misconception that follows power wherever it goes, that the smartest person in the room is the one closest to the top, the one giving orders, the one being feared, the one who refuses to step aside. But every now and then, a different kind of intelligence appears. Not loud, not aggressive, not even particularly impressive at first glance. The kind of intelligence that understands something most people never do. That winning the game and surviving it are not the same thing. And sometimes, the smartest move a person can make is to walk away before they win. There's a certain type of man the world instinctively respects, the one who speaks with certainty, who takes control of the room, who never hesitates, never backs down, never appears unsure. We're taught to see that man as intelligent, as capable, as worthy of power. But intelligence, real intelligence, doesn't always look like control. Sometimes it looks like restraint, like hesitation, like the quiet awareness that not every opportunity is meant to be taken. And every once in a while, the smartest person in the room is the one who realizes that winning is not the same thing as surviving what comes after. Little Carmine Lupertazzi exists in The Sopranos as both an insider and an outsider. He is the son of Carmine Lupertazzi Sr., a respected and powerful boss within the New York mafia structure. By birthright alone, he belongs to a world defined by hierarchy, loyalty, and control. But from the moment he appears, there's a disconnect. He doesn't command attention the way his father did. He doesn't speak with the sharp precision of men like Johnny Sack. He doesn't carry the quiet menace of someone like Tony Soprano. Instead, Little Carmine often feels slightly out of place. His words come out wrong. His thoughts seem half-formed. His attempts at insight land somewhere between profound and confusing. To the men around him, this becomes his defining trait. He's seen as soft, unfocused, even unintentionally comedic, a man who inherited proximity to power, but not the instincts required to wield it. And yet, when Carmine Sr. dies, something shifts. Because in a world where succession is everything, Little Carmine becomes a natural contender. Not because he demands it, not because he earns it, but because in this system, legacy creates expectation. And expectation can be mistaken for destiny. So Little Carmine steps forward. He enters a power struggle with Johnny Sack, one built on alliances, threats, and quiet escalations. For a moment, it appears as though he is finally becoming what everyone assumed he never could be: a leader, a contender, a man willing to fight for the top. But what unfolds isn't a rise. It's a revelation. The son of Carmine Lupertazzi Sr., the longtime boss of one of New York's most powerful crime families, he exists in the shadow of a legacy he never quite seems equipped to carry. He misuses words, struggles to articulate himself clearly, often says things that sound almost right but not quite. To the men around him, Tony Soprano, Johnny Sack, even his own allies, Little Carmine is seen as unserious, a man born into power, but not built for it. And yet, when his father dies and the question of succession emerges, Little Carmine does something unexpected. He steps forward, not with the calculated precision of a seasoned leader, but with a kind of hesitant ambition, as if he believes he's supposed to want this, even if he doesn't fully understand why. What follows is a brief but revealing glimpse into what happens when someone inherits the idea of power without fully embracing its cost. There's a pattern that repeats itself across every hierarchy, whether it's organized crime, business, or even everyday life. The individuals who climb the highest are often the ones most willing to assert themselves, to dominate conversations, to push past resistance, to interpret hesitation as weakness. And over time, this behavior becomes confused with intelligence, because aggression produces results. It creates movement, it forces outcomes. So we begin to associate force with capability. But force is not the same as understanding. In fact, the more someone relies on aggression, the less they may actually be thinking about the consequences of what they're doing. They are reacting, not reflecting. And in The Sopranos, this pattern is everywhere. Johnny Sack's pride blinds him to long-term strategy. Tony's need for control traps him in cycles of paranoia and violence. Every decision, every escalation, every show of strength comes at a cost that no one fully accounts for in the moment. Because in that world, stepping back feels like failure, even when stepping back would be the smartest move available. Little Carmine enters this system with a disadvantage that slowly reveals itself as something else entirely. He doesn't fully embody the traits that define the others. He's not as sharp, not as aggressive, not as consumed by the need to dominate. And initially, this makes him appear unfit for leadership. But what if those qualities aren't strengths at all? What if they are liabilities disguised as confidence? Because the men who appear the most capable are also the ones most trapped, trapped by their reputations, by their pride, by the expectations they've created for themselves. They cannot step back because doing so would contradict the image they've spent years building. Little Carmine, on the other hand, never fully builds that image, and because of that, he's not bound by it. In worlds built on hierarchy, especially ones like organized crime, ambition is often mistaken for intelligence. The man who pushes forward the hardest, who refuses to back down, who asserts dominance at every turn, is assumed to be the most capable. But ambition, at its core, is not wisdom. It's hunger. And hunger doesn't ask whether something is worth having. It only asks how to get it. Little Carmine exists as an anomaly in this system, because while he initially participates in the power struggle, aligning himself against Johnny Sack, allowing conflict to escalate, there's always something slightly off about his involvement. He doesn't carry the same intensity, the same obsession, the same need to prove himself. It's as if he's playing a role he inherited, rather than one he chose. And this is where perception begins to betray reality, because the other men like Johnny Sack, see Carmine's lack of sharpness as weakness. They interpret his awkward speech, his philosophical tangents, his misused words as signs of incompetence. But what they fail to recognize is that Carmine is one of the only people in that world not fully consumed by ego. And ego, more than anything else, is what keeps that entire system running. Ego tells a man he deserves a top spot. Ego convinces him that stepping back is humiliation. Ego reframes survival as failure if it doesn't come with dominance. So men chase power, not because it fulfills them, but because they cannot tolerate the idea of someone else having it. Little Carmine, in contrast, begins to drift in a different direction. Not because he's outmaneuvered, not because he's defeated, but because slowly he starts to see the cost more clearly than the others. There's a quiet turning point in Little Carmine's story that doesn't announce itself with violence or spectacle. It comes in the form of reflection, a realization shaped not by power, but by perspective. He recalls something simple, something his wife once told him, that happiness matters, that peace matters, that there is a life outside of constant conflict and competition. And for most people, this idea wouldn't seem revolutionary. But within the world of The Sopranos, it's almost unthinkable, because the system itself depends on men rejecting that idea. If they valued peace over power, they wouldn't fight. They wouldn't rise. They wouldn't sustain the structure that defines them, so they convince themselves that power is the goal, that control is fulfillment, even when the evidence around them suggests otherwise. Little Carmine sees that evidence more clearly than the others. He sees what happens to men who reach the top. They don't become free, they become targets. They don't gain peace, they inherit responsibility, pressure, and constant threat. Their lives shrink, even as their influence expands. And once you reach that position, there is no stepping down, only holding on or being removed. So Carmine makes a decision that defies everything that world stands for. He chooses not to continue, not because he's defeated, not because he lacks the ability to fight, but because he recognizes that the outcome isn't worth the cost. And in that moment, something shifts. The man who was seen as unintelligent becomes the only one acting with clarity, because intelligence is not just about knowing how to achieve something, it's about understanding whether achieving it is worth it at all. While others measure success by position, Carmine measures it by consequence. While others chase control, he evaluates what that control requires. And in doing so, he arrives at a conclusion the others never reach. That the game itself is the problem, not the players, not the strategies, but the structure that demands everything in exchange for something that never lasts. So he steps away. And in stepping away, he does something none of the others can. He breaks the cycle, not through force, but through refusal.
Hello.
It's me. A tennis match with those guys. My guy won.
Oh, yeah?
The other one, the son. He dropped out.
What, he got hurt?
Nothing like that. It's settled, that's all.
All right. Little Carmine's out.
Little Carmine Lupertazzi doesn't leave behind the kind of legacy that usually defines men in his world. There are no stories of dominance, no defining victories, no lasting reputation built on fear. Instead, there is absence, a quiet withdrawal from a system that continues without him. And for most people, that absence would be interpreted as failure, as wasted potential, as an opportunity left unrealized. But maybe that interpretation says more about how we define success than it does about him. Because what Little Carmine understands, what the others never quite grasp, is that not every path needs to be followed to the end. Some roads are better left unfinished, some victories are better left unclaimed, and some versions of success are only successful from a distance. Up close, they demand more than they're worth. So in the end, he becomes something rare. Not the strongest man, not the most respected, not the one who rose the highest, but the one who saw the cost clearly and decided that it wasn't a price he was willing to pay. And maybe that's what intelligence actually looks like. Not the ability to take power, but the awareness to know when to leave it behind. Because sometimes the smartest decision a person can make is not to win, it's to walk away.
Carmine, what the fuck's the matter with you? How many times we gotta tell you, do not speed in this fucking neighborhood?
Cazzo fai? Tu non lo sai, sembra